The Making of an Elizabethan Mind, a Classical Curriculum. Lecture 1. Why Latin? Why these books? Let us begin with a morning. It is somewhere around 1575. The town is Stratford-upon-Avon, a market town prosperous enough, with a respectable grammar school endowed by the Guild of the Holy Cross. A boy of 11 arrives before 7 o'clock. He will leave, if he is fortunate, around 5 in the afternoon. In between, he will do almost nothing but Latin. He'll pass it, translate it, copy it, memorize it, speak it, and be beaten for getting it wrong. Tomorrow, he will do the same. Next week, next year, the year after. Latin. The masters at such schools were required to hold a university degree, which meant they too had done almost nothing but Latin for the better part of their lives, and they saw no reason why the experience should be made comfortable for anyone else. This is where we begin. Not with the glory of Rome, not with the marble and the eagles, with a cold room and a frightened boy and an entirely relentless grind of grammatical instruction. Because that is the truth of what a classical education was, and if we do not start there, we will romanticize everything that follows. And yet, out of that room came something extraordinary. The men who were educated in this way in the grammar schools and then at Oxford or Cambridge or the Inns of Court emerged with a mental furniture so richly stocked, so deeply organized, that they could think about any problem, any crisis, any human situation, and instantly reach for an example. Not a vague impression, a specific man, a specific speech, a specific moment from 800 years of Roman history, retrieved with the precision of someone who has read the same text so many times it lives in them. This was not showing off, though it was certainly that too. It was the actual technology of thought. What we are doing in this course is recovering that furniture. We are going to read, slowly and with full attention, the authors who made the Elizabethan mind. We are going to meet them not as historical curiosities, but as the living intellectual companions they were to every educated man of the late 16th century. By the end, you will understand not merely what Shakespeare read, but why he thought the way he thought, why certain images recurred to him, why certain political anxieties expressed themselves in certain forms, why the fall of the Roman Republic felt, to an Elizabethan audience, rather like something that might happen next Thursday. But first we need to understand what this education was for, and the answer is not what most people assume. It was not for the love of antiquity. The Elizabethan schoolmaster was not training antiquarians. He was not producing men who would spend their lives tenderly cataloguing Greek vases or publishing annotated editions of Livy, though some of them did end up doing exactly that, to considerable profit. The purpose of a classical education was intensely, urgently practical. It was to produce men who could speak, write, persuade, govern, and survive. The key word, the word that unlocks everything, is rhetoric. We have rather diminished this word. We use it now almost always pejoratively. Mere rhetoric, empty rhetoric, the rhetoric of politicians. In the 16th century, it meant something closer to the opposite. Rhetoric was the master art. It was the discipline of using language with such precision, such force, such calculated effect, that you could move men to action, diffuse a crisis, win a legal case, compose a dispatch that would determine the policy of a kingdom. A man without rhetoric was a man without power, regardless of how much he actually knew. A man with it could, in principle, do almost anything. And the Romans, the Elizabethans believe with complete conviction, had understood rhetoric better than any civilization before or since. They had theorized it, systematized it, practiced it at the highest possible level, and, crucially, left their practice recorded in texts that could be studied. Every speech Cicero ever gave to the Roman Senate was available. Every letter he wrote in the last anguished years of the Republic, his theoretical treatises on oratory, on duty, on the nature of the gods. You could, if you were diligent enough, reconstruct from Cicero alone an entire education in how to be a functioning political animal. This is why Latin, not sentiment, Utility. You will notice I said the Romans rather than the Greeks. This requires a moment's pause, because the Greeks, as every educated person then and now well knows, were hardly negligible. Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides, Homer. These were not unknown quantities, and yet in the standard Elizabethan grammar school curriculum, Greek came late if it came at all, and the Greek authors who were studied were frequently studied in Latin translations. Why? Partly it is simply the practical matter of which language opened the most doors. Latin was the language of law, of the church, of diplomacy, of medicine, of virtually every learned discipline in Europe. A man who knew Latin could operate across the entire continent. Greek was rarer, more specialized, associated with scholarship of a rarefied kind. But there is also something deeper. The Greeks, to the Elizabethan mind, were theorists. They told you what justice was. The Romans showed you what justice cost. Plato gives you the ideal republic. Cicero gives you the actual republic, the noise and compromise and occasional magnificent courage of real political life, then shows you it collapsing and tells you in his letters what it felt like from the inside to watch it go. The Elizabethans, who were living through their own period of intense political anxiety, found this more useful, considerably more useful. The Roman Republic fascinated them for a reason that was not entirely comfortable to articulate. Here was a political system that had, at its height, managed to balance competing interests with extraordinary sophistication. Aristocracy, popular will, executive power, held in a tension that was permanent and productive and, for several centuries, workable. And then it had failed, comprehensively, bloodily, and in the living memory of men whose words you could still read. The question that haunted every Elizabethan political thinker, though few of them would say it aloud without the protective cover of speaking about Rome, was simply this: are we next? Is this what happens to all such arrangements? Is the Republic always doomed to become the Principe? These are the questions that sit underneath everything we will be reading, not always visible, but always there. Let me say something about how we will approach these texts, because it matters quite as much as which texts we read. The Elizabethan student did not read for information. He read for imitatio imitation. This sounds limiting, and in the hands of a dull teacher it was, but in its full sense it was something altogether more ambitious. The idea was that you absorbed the great authors so completely that they became part of your own expressive capacity. You did not quote Cicero to demonstrate you had read Cicero. You had internalized Cicero's rhythms, his argumentative structures, his habits of mind, so thoroughly that when you faced a new problem, your thinking moved along Ciceronian lines without your consciously deciding it should. He had become, as the pedagogues like to say, part of your copia, your abundance, your store of available thought. This is why these authors were read young, and read repeatedly. The repetition was not mindless. It was the creation of deep structure. A man who has construed the same passage of Virgil 40 times does not remember it the way you remember a number you have written down somewhere. It is woven into his nervous system. He can hear a phrase and feel the next phrase coming. He can sense when a piece of prose is going wrong because it violates a rhythm he has never consciously articulated, but knows in his bones. Shakespeare, who by any reasonable estimate had this education, and nothing much more, demonstrates its results throughout his career. When he writes Mark Antony's funeral speech for Julius Caesar, he is not displaying his knowledge of Roman oratory. He is doing Roman oratory from the inside, with the ease of a man who learned to swim before he knew the word for water. That is what we are aiming for in this course, not familiarity with these texts, absorption. A word, finally, on what this course is not. We will not be reading these authors in order to find timeless moral lessons to apply to our daily lives, though timeless moral lessons will certainly present themselves, and you are welcome to them. We will not be treating them as primitive versions of thoughts that have since been improved upon. We will not be looking for the ways in which the Romans anticipated some later set of values, and congratulating them when they did. we will be doing something harder and more interesting. We will be trying to read as they read, with a mind shaped by the same education, alert to the same illusions, troubled by the same political anxieties. The late 16th century was not a comfortable place. Elizabeth was aging without an heir, and every educated man in England was running the same quiet calculation about what would happen when she was gone. The Earl of Essex, brilliant, reckless, adored by the public and useful to nobody, was beginning to feel rather like a certain figure from Roman history whom we will be spending considerable time with. The question of what a good man does when his state is failing was not, in 1599, an academic question. It never was. In our next lecture, we follow our 11-year-old boy out of the schoolroom and into the world he is being educated for. We will meet two men whose careers between them define the range of choices available to the educated Elizabethan. And we will begin to understand why the classical education was not merely ornamental. In the most direct sense, it was a matter of life and death. End of Lecture 1.